favorite person.
I tell you,
and we have our very important grief specialist with us as well.
Yeah, before we get to grief, I got to tell you good stuff. Good stuff is that we are, we're in a little corner again. Kim, if you're there, come on and see if you come on live and see if you come on in a big screen. No, small screen again.
For those of you who are in, we're having a little bit of difficulty and we're going to restart. So just, we had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning and we're trying to correct it early. So we're going to get our video correct before we launch in. So thank you for joining us for Duzie Live.
Hopefully we're on. Got some pictures here. Yep, we got picture. Kim, you have a picture there?
You can try to put yourself right up there, Kim. That's great.
So you may have to put in your information here again.
Okay.
Put this in and this in. And
we had to restart. That's all right.
All right. So as you come in, we just did a restart. We're ready to go on Duzie Live 2 o'clock. And we're looking today at grief. We're looking at good grief. So we just welcome you to come in. When you come in, please take a moment and sign in your name and sign in where you're coming from. We want to recognize where you're from. And it's just always so interesting to know where this is going around the world. So please, if you would, sign in and write down where you are coming from.
What part of the world are you in?
All right. Well, welcome. Hopefully you're coming in.
Right.
Okay, Dale Potter, you're back. Welcome back.
Dale Potter, whoop whoop.
Coming in from Portugal.
Liz West, you're with us. Thank you for jumping in.
Good.
Matt Taylor. Good afternoon. He's coming in from the
Stephen
UK.
and Katrina.
Woo! The new parents of their second child, Elliot. Diane, thank you for joining us from Wisconsin. So happy to have you with us.
Joshua,
hunkered down in Seattle. Welcome in. Jacob Faulkner from California. Evelyn, thank you for joining us from Texas. Roseanne from the Netherlands. Thank you. You're one of our regulars. We love to have you. Lara, hello from Switzerland. Thanks for jumping in with us. And Phoenicia, I'm so glad you made it in from France. Thank you for joining us. Illy from the Netherlands. Wow, so many awesome people.
Let me give you just a quick
thank you.
A quick update. At the 9 o'clock sessions, we had some problems with audio. We tried to fix it. I'm not sure if it's coming through clear. If you're hearing us okay, just give us a TU, which is a thumb up. Just give us a TU. That the sound's coming through okay. I'm not sure what happened, where the little echo's coming from, but if you're hearing us okay, just a TU means a thumb up.
Yeah, so if at any time something doesn't work, just put it in the chats and we'll have a look. Oh, a couple more people have popped in. Kat Sloan from Michigan. Thank you for joining us. You're the bomb diggity, my sister. And Evelyn is doing the Santo Domingo PST. So on the ship, we had a group of us that joined in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And our chant goes something like this. Santo Domingo PST. He moves the storm and he moves me. Santo Domingo.
Wow, I can't believe
I hope those of you who know it. Bishu's coming to us from Istanbul. Thank you for joining us. Thumbs up. We got some thumbs up. Thank you for that. Thanks. So things are looking good. Just want to make sure. Rahel is joining us again. Thank you for joining us. She was with us this morning. So appreciate you being here with us. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started. I just want to tell you that we have some amazing things coming up. You're seeing Kim Kukura, and we're going to get to know her a little bit more in just a few minutes. And she's joining us. And this is what you can expect during this Duzie Live here today. So we're going to take you from a place of identifying if you have grief. And what is grief? Kim's going to help us understand it. But basically, when you have conflicting emotions, for example, you're happy and sad all at the same time, you're probably in grief. So we're going to help you. And the goal of today is to help you take your undelivered communication and try to find a place for it to be safely heard, potentially by another human being who has a big heart and 2 ears. So a good listening, loving person. And Kim's going to walk us through how to identify where we're at and what to do with it. And I want to encourage you to come backstage. So we're going to go for about an hour, 60 minutes. And then for those of you who have extra time, then we're going to take you backstage. And Kim's going to bring us a bonus of the emotional energy checklist that helps us identify where we are with our changes, challenges, and choices. I'll say no more because we don't want to spoil it. It's going to be so good. We just want you to stay and get all the goodness that we have planned for today.
So I'm thinking, I know what this repeating, I just figured out why the thing is repeating. Kim, do you have a set of headphones that you can wear? Do you know if there is a pair? If not, that's all right.
Don't.
I think it's coming through your computer and then back into the microphone.
That's okay if you don't.
We can deal with that. What I want for all of you to do, if you would, today you're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen. You're going to want to take notes.
Yes.
We got about 30 seconds of an intro here that we're going to launch, and then we're going to dive right into Good Grief. See you on the other side of the video.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome back to Good Grief. Today we are looking at the subject that I don't know if we want to look at that. I was going back into my head thinking of grief as we move into today. And I remember a time when I went to a funeral. And this funeral was of a 19-year-old boy who had committed suicide. Now, I didn't know the boy, but I knew the family of his girlfriend, and so we were invited to come. And I remember being at the funeral and watching what was going on, and I had never experienced wailing before. The people were in such pain and such grief, and I remember feeling something in my gut, like something that was so deep. And then later on, I was going through some things where there was a broken relationship or I was moving, and that same gut feeling came back. That's grief. And we're not taught how to deal with that. It doesn't come from the church. It doesn't come from school. Most of the time it doesn't come from our family because we're not ready for it. We know how to start relationships and we know how to start things, but it's so hard to finish, especially if they don't finish well. We're going to look at today how to take that and make that into good grief that we process through to completion.
I find that very interesting. He's identifying his stomach, his abdomen. I feel my grief right here in my heart. I'm a heart feeler, and you're feeling yours like in your gut. We all feel it in different ways, and everyone's unique experience is validated and it's real. And Kim's going to help us understand that. So Kim,
one second before Kim comes.
Oh yeah.
I just have to tell you, I have my little.
What does that mean?
Now, that is the sound of a poll. We're going to be taking some polls today. And to get you ready, I'll bring this out and I'll be.
And when you hear that sound, you might want to stop taking your vigorous notes. And sorry, Matt, that you're running out of notebooks. You do need to buy one. I have one of my favorites I can highly recommend that I get from Amazon since I can't go to stores and shop for it. So I can send you that link.
But anyway, let's get on with seeing who this Kim is.
Yeah, Kim, pop up here in our midst. Put your video on, and there she is. I'm going to minimize us, but here is Kim. And we met Kim on the Logos Hope. More of those stories to come. But Kim, before we get to know you a little bit, why don't you unpack grief, just the subject of grief with us so we can all be on the same page.
All right.
Whoops, I did the wrong one.
Well, I'm sitting here today with my backpack, And when I was born, I had a very empty, light backpack and I had clear eyes. But as my life progressed, I started having losses in my life. And instead of knowing what to do with the mixed emotions that came from those losses, things like being bullied as a child or having an unexpected illness, having a relative die, maybe some of us that have had a history of abuse. I've been through a divorce. All of these, because I didn't know what else to do but hold them in my heart, began adding up, and I collected them into my backpack. And before I knew it, there was this heaviness. They started to feel like boulders. It was very heavy, and I had a feeling of a loss of aliveness. But we're here today to talk about good grief and how to get back to that feeling of being fully alive.
So good.
Kim, thank you for that. That illustration for me is so powerful because you even have labeled your stones in really creative ways to help you identify some of those stones that could become those big rocks.
Yeah.
And I think that's our purpose today, is to help people not have to carry the big rocks, to take care of them when they're small stone,
Yes.
able to deal with them. Tell us a little bit more. You're very passionate about grief.
Yeah.
First of all, I would say, from knowing you, you're extremely passionate about loving people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are extremely empathetic. I have seen you on board the Logos Hope, where we lived with 60 different nationalities of people, about 400 people. And anyone who got touched by Kim came away super loved and enthused to just live life in a deeper way. So we are blessed to have Kim with us today.
Yeah.
Kim, what are some of the things in your history? I know you're a registered nurse. I know you've been managing an intake for a psychiatric trauma center, and now you've got a new job. But where did this passion for grief and helping people process grief come from?
Well, I would say that the way that God's original design of my heart and my personality is peace, to be a peacemaker and to be a listener. And I found that by the time I was in high school, friends as well as their parents were coming to me just to talk about their issues. And I just listened. And so I think that probably informed my career path going into psychiatric nursing. I was already just used to listening and reflecting back what people were saying. And as I mentioned, I had started gathering my own losses along the way, and once they got pretty heavy, thankfully that did bring me back to Jesus. But there was still some unfinished business from the past that I was storing in my heart. And when a deep grief came, the end of my first marriage, I'd been married for 25 years, and that was the deepest grief I had ever experienced. I was being discipled by a woman who said, let's do this grief recovery handbook together. She had suffered verbal and physical abuse in her childhood and knew it was still impacting her today. And so we went through the steps of recovery, grief recovery, and it set me free in a way from these boulders that was just something I wanted to continue sharing with others and to see them released into all that God has for them.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing the deep bits of what you have experienced in life. And I know that that's going to help us as well. I just wonder in the chat, those of you who are listening, are any of you experiencing grief? I would imagine that some of you are regulars on Duzie Life, so thank you and welcome back. It's awesome to have you. But some are new people who have joined just today, probably because of the topic of good grief. So if you have experienced grief, or you think that might be you, because grief happens in any transition, which we all are in. It's coronavirus season. It's the loss of our normal rhythms. How many of you would say you are experiencing grief? If it's you, just put in the chat, yes, yes, yes. Just go ahead and type the word
So if
yes.
we're experiencing grief now.
Yeah, if you're experiencing grief
Put in a yes.
now.
Okay, quickly. Sorry. We have a transition here. My husband needs the car keys.
Okay.
That's all right.
For those of you that remember Ken, say hi, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Guys.
Happy travels.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we're getting, yes, absolutely. I think the big grief right now is in missing people, right? We have lots of different losses. I'm seeing the yeses.
This is very important
I
for today.
also know that many of you are caring people, that you're people who are interested in supporting others who are going through grief, and you might be experiencing grief yourself and helping others. And I want, just so we can get a response from you in the chat as well, if you also like to help others, just write in the chat, help. It might be that I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Matt Taylor said, hi, Ken, by the way. I see many of you saying yes, that you are experiencing. Dorothea, welcome in. I didn't see your name earlier. And Alice, welcome back. Thank you. You were with us earlier today. Thank you for just putting your yes in there. If any of you are helpers, that you love to support people with a big heart and 2 listening ears, the way Kim described it, I see those many of you are also there to help people. So thank you for putting that help. Yes, and help. Just keep putting those in whenever you, if you get to that space. Thank you for your response.
Just had a few internal comments about the sort of echo that's in there. We figured out where it's coming from. There's a circle that's going through Kim's computer back. It's not something we can fix right now. Sorry about that, but that we know where it's at now. So please bear with the little circle or reverb that's there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of helps. Yeah, Dorothea, Michaela, Katz, Venetia, Matt, Jacob, Roseanne, Evelyn, Tammy, Liz, Illy. Laura said, I missed the help part. Yeah, the help is just about if you are one that likes to care for other people. So we all might be going through grief and helping others in grief as well. So that's what the help. Yeah. So we've got a, looks like a technical question. Dale's asking, do you separate trauma and ACEs and grief?
So when we get to our slide where we're defining grief, we do, we see grief is grief. Where there's a loss, or even if it's a moral loss or a moral trauma where someone's had to defend, just what, yes, we consider grief is grief. So we do not separate them.
So everything's all together. This is a more generalized approach. And Kim, I don't know, we were talking earlier, we're not trying to fix anybody's grief right now. It's more of an educational moment. Can you speak to that?
Certainly. So I am a grief recovery specialist. That means I've had training to be able to sit with people one-on-one or in group settings to actually walk through these steps of grief recovery toward completion of their unfinished business that resulted from the loss. And so what we'll talk about today is more an introduction to the subject of grief and some of the impact. And there's a slide that will kind of go over some of this, but that it will help us to begin to discover what might be unfinished for us. So that's kind of where we're headed for today. And once you know that, then there are some options you can take further steps to work through the steps toward completion.
I love that you have your expertise in grief recovery. You are an educator, and I love that you call yourself a partner. Mm-hmm. So you not only educate, but you like to walk the journey with us. Yes. We're ready for you to just take us through the whole grief training. So we're going to have a little bit, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Kim, and you just take us through what we need to know further about grief.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we are talking about good grief, and it's help for yesterday, the things we might be carrying from yesterday, today, and tomorrow, because we do not want to carry these things into tomorrow. Okay. All right, so what are the goals of this time together? We've already kind of talked about that, but how is grief good? Why is it so misunderstood? What is the impact on us, children, youth, and adults? What are the sources, some of the sources of our grief? And it says yours and mine, because sometimes we are caretakers, and I've got my own grief, and as I care for others, I'm impacted maybe by theirs. And then we're going to identify ways to relieve some of the grief we carry. Look for those aha moments at the bottom of some of the slides. And listen for the bell for the polls. So grief is the normal and natural response to loss of any kind. I mean, it's normal. By any other name, it is still grief, whether we call it burnout or trauma or PTSD. It is still grief. It's also the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in something familiar, especially if there's an emotional component to that pattern. It is the feeling of reaching out for someone one more time to discover they're not there. And it's a sense of having unfinished business, such as disappointment or maybe regrets in a relationship. So our aha is that grief is not limited to bereavement and mourning after a death. And losses are both tangible and intangible. Things we can touch. Oh, I hear the bell.
So it's now time, Kim, we don't see your video. Maybe you can turn your video back on again.
It's my connection.
Okay, so sometimes Kim's not able to video out. So what that bell means is there's a poll that's up, and we'd love for you to just respond in the poll. She's got these 4 areas of grief, and we would like to know, what would you like Kim to just talk a little bit more about? Would that be the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind? Grief by any other name is grief. Would you like her to talk more about conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in something familiar, or feeling of reaching out for someone one or more time to discover they are not there, or a sense of having unfinished business such as disappointment or regrets?
So right now we have 100% on the very last one. Oh, wait.
Just changed
We have 33% at the conflicting feelings, and we've got 60% having a sense of unfinished business. Oh, but it's just changed again. We got 28% looking at the connecting feelings.
Changing.
We
This
have
is awesome.
20%, 18%, 2%. Unbelievable. This is just, I thank you.
Wow, you guys are just
Thank
pouring in the responses.
Right now, the one that's leading is conflicting
Feelings. So Kim, start with that, and the runner-up is having sense of having unfinished business. So conflicting feelings and unfinished business. Go there first.
Okay. So when we have a loss or a change in our life, and I can talk about the end of a relationship. That's to begin with. We've established familiar patterns with that person. And so if that person moves away, if they die, or if there's a broken relationship, we may have sadness. We may have some relief if it was a difficult relationship. We may, even if we are relieved the person's gone, we may miss the things that we shared together on a regular basis. We may wish that we could still talk to them. We just may have all of these mixed emotions, and they all are valid.
That's good.
Great. So we've got the conflicting feelings and the unfinished business. Thank you for taking that deeper. And again, if you have more questions, just pop them in the chat. Dale says the hardest thing about the desire to help is that we often want to fix them rather than listen and be there without an agenda. Yeah. And that recognition is to secondary grief and trauma is so invaluable to understand as a helper. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Just keep them rolling, and we'll come back and catch them when we need to.
And I'll comment on the unfinished business. A few more things there. It may be things that we wish we had said, or things we wish we hadn't said. It may be things we never got the chance to say, or it may be things that we got to say but feel like they were never heard by the other person. That's a big disappointment. Or again, we may have said things that we regret, or done things we regret, or maybe never had the chance to say thank you. Just so many possibilities of this unfinished business.
That's good.
Diane, we've got another question. What a great question from Diane. Thank you. Do some cultures recognize the importance of grief better than we do here in the U.S.?
I am sure there could be. I mean, I've worked with many cultures on the ship and have found that it's a universal need to be given permission to take the time to grieve and process. But someone else may be able to answer that question better than I can. But in my experience, it's a universal need for people to understand this is natural and normal, and it's a process we need to go through to heal.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Michaela asks, if you're used to a constant change, can you go through grief once, or do you go through a period of time with no change? So if you're a constant change, so this is coming from third culture kid right here. If you're experiencing a lot of change, talk to us about grief and constant change like that.
Yeah. So it's really important for to have the right tools to directly address the constant change, to be able to just be able to share your heart and be able to identify and discover what might be unfinished each time there's a transition, just so you can give it voice and be heard. So that's a really important thing to allow yourself to do.
One thing I was going to say about the cultures is I know we've been in some cultures, like after the tsunami, we went to places, and during the AIDS epidemic in South Africa, different places. And what I've noticed is some cultures are allowed to express it more than other cultures, that they're free to just, it doesn't matter what anyone says. They can just express it. Where I think in the U.S. sometimes we're the culture of don't cry, don't get, wait till you get to your own room. And so I have seen some of the differences in culture.
And Matt asks, how can we get better at recognizing our different feelings, especially when there's so many conflicting, confusing emotions? And we're going to get there, aren't we, Kim?
We sure are. Stay tuned.
Great question, Matt. It's coming very soon. Kim, take us to the next section, will you?
All right. So here's some examples of losses, tangible and intangible, that happen from a very young age. It starts with our binkies, blankies, and bottles, like little children, little toddlers, where all of a sudden they're too old to have the things that have brought them comfort, and they're taken away. And then, so for them, that's a loss of comfort, not just a loss of the object, but a loss of the comfort that object brought. And I'm not saying we should all have our bottles and blankies for our entire life. I'm just saying this is something to be aware of. This is where it can start in our lives. Then, of course, we grow up and we may have the death of a pet, estrangement from friends, moving, school changes, graduation, even marriage. These are considered positive changes, but they're still changes and transitions, as well as pregnancy and having children. And then we, move on to what kind of more known losses: death, divorce, health changes, financial change, job loss, legal problems, the end of addiction. That surprises people sometimes because, the thing that the person has been, again, like the binky and the blankie and the bottle, been using for comfort, this substance or this activity is now gone. And how am I going to comfort myself now? It is a true recovery process. It's a loss of that item that's been comforting them. And so there is a grief that goes with that. It's like a new identity. Wait, I'm not an addict anymore. Who am I? And then moral losses. I skipped down there. Loss of trust, loss of safety. These can come from if you have a history of neglect or a history of abuse, just any time where your space has been invaded in a way that was out of your control. Sometimes we experience a loss of faith when we believe, we just are upset with God. We're upset with God, and it feels like he's not who I thought he was. I'm disillusioned. And I said in the last cast that sometimes when we meet people who are agnostic or atheist, really what you've met is a griever, someone who has had a deep grief and is blaming God. And so if they can sometimes get to completion of that grief, their heart opens to God. And I've actually seen that happen.
Kim, just a quick question, because we see a lot of people today who are definitely in the midst of deconstructing their faith, and their problem in their grieving isn't so much from God, but people who call themselves followers of God. And so I've seen it both on the side of the grief is coming from that disconnection with God, but also that they somehow felt totally not accepted by the people of God. So I think both is
absolutely,
at work.
absolutely, yeah, yep, yeah, right. And then there's moral losses, and that, especially in this time of pandemic, we see governments handling things a certain way. We see protesters, we see, maybe military action, and it feels morally, something might feel morally wrong, and it's a loss that we experience as we see things that just hurt our moral heart. And then of course there are the loss of hopes and dreams and expectations as well. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and I love that picture down there of the rock. Kim, you're talking about loss accumulates over time, like adding rocks to a backpack.
Yes.
So we can't forget about that. We could have multiple griefs from this list you're showing us right there, all at the same time that we're carrying around.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all that to say, here in our time of pandemic, it's okay to grieve. We don't compare our losses. So you may have a friend whose grandmother died, or a friend died, but I just missed a trip. It's no big deal. But we don't compare. We allow each other to experience our own losses fully, without comparing. So it's okay to grieve if your trip was canceled. It's okay to grieve if you were going to have a baby shower and it got canceled. It's okay to grieve if you were ready to graduate and now you won't be able to walk with all of your classmates. All of these, parties, celebrations, it's okay to grieve these things.
Yeah. So it's now time for a poll. And we've got a poll up there just to respond to these effects of grieving. So would you like to hear more from Kim? Would you like her to talk more about tangible losses? So those people, places, things that we can see physically that we have lost.
We have 100% at the moment.
Or would you like intangible losses, loss of trust, safety, control, faith, respect, self-respect, and moral losses? We'll give you a couple more seconds to pop your thought in there, but initially, it is changing, but initially our greatest
16% right now at tangible loss and 83% at intangible.
So will you just start with the intangible losses? Keep voting here for a couple more. We'll give you more time, but it's obvious, Kim, that we want intangible losses. Speak to us.
Okay. All right. Well, so I think I did allude to this a little bit before, that when there is an end in a relationship or an end in a job or a death, anything that changes, it's not just that I no longer see this person. It's not just I no longer go here to work. It's all of the patterns, the celebrations, the rituals, the richness of life that was associated with those actions, those people, those places. So again, when I went through my deep loss, when I went through a divorce, it wasn't just that the relationship with my spouse was ending. It was family Christmases were ending. It was double dates, and other married friends now weren't as comfortable inviting just me to have fellowship together. So I had a loss of community. So there are all of these intangible parts around the people, places, and things that often, when we want people to just get on with their grief, we don't realize it's not just the event or the person. There's so much more associated with it that they've lost or that we lose as well.
Yeah, Kim, we've got a couple questions. If we can pop those out here. A comment from Dale: change is often related to grief and loss. Anytime we have change, think grief. And what Kim's talking about here, we should definitely process. Liz asks, how or what can you fill the gap? How or with what, can you fill the gap of loss?
Yeah. So we have a loss. We're taught how to accumulate people, places, and things, but we're not taught how to lose them. So, we do want to put something here. But what we're going to talk about today is sharing out from our heart, and taking some steps to communicate what's unfinished, so that we can move forward. So we're not going to try to replace the loss. We're going to try to move through it together, and then go on to being fully alive in the present moment.
I love that picture you have, Kim. We're taught to hold on, but we're not taught how to let go.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this time with you today is so valuable. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah.
Jacob also says, as an Enneagram Type 4 creative, it's easy for me to sit in grief for too long and not move forward. What practical steps can be taken to get out of your head, feelings, and start taking actions?
Oh, Jacob, I hear you. I'm an Enneagram 9, and I'm very interested in the whole concept. So I do hear you. And so everything that we're going to be talking about today as we move forward and we get into some good grief relief, I think will be helpful.
Yeah, great. And then Diane asks, will there be resources such as books, podcasts recommended to help with specific follow-up? And I made a comment there, and I just want to confirm and affirm to you, Diane, she is a woman of multiple resources. So Kim does have some resources to give us, but if any of you who are in the chat or in the space, if you have resources for us to deal with grief, we want to encourage you to go ahead and put them right in the chat. And also, I would just like to take this moment to just give a little plug here for what we have. It's called the Fully Alive Revolution. And the Fully Alive Revolution is a Facebook group that we currently have right now. It's got 182 members. It is a private group, so we're the ones that let you in. And we're currently in the midst this month of something we call #CreativelyAlive. And we're inviting people to go into that space and share. And that can also be a place for resources. So if you've got some resources, definitely put them here. But also we encourage you to go to the Fully Alive Revolution Facebook group. If you're not already in that, please message us any of the ways you know how.
It's also a place that after a conversation like we're having here, people can go even for the next week and just talk about grief and just begin to dialogue and help one another.
Yeah, and so we're encouraging, and I think this is one of the great ways to deal with grief is to creatively express ourselves. Yeah. And we're encouraging people, if you can, to post something every day or whenever you can. And when you go on there, not only post once so that you're like putting yourself out, but be a big heart with two big ears listening and comment on two other people so that we can keep the conversation going and have a support for one another. And I think when we do life and when we do grief together, there's such benefit, isn't there?
A few more comments here, Suze.
Okay, so Michaela says, for me, it's really easy to push down all of my emotions. It's easier to think and not feel. What are practical ways to grow in letting yourself feel all those emotions?
Yeah. Well, this is where I think of a balloon, a helium balloon that you've got in a swimming pool submerged underwater. And it's really easy to hold that balloon underwater at first. It's just light and easy. But after 24, 48, 72 hours, your arm is going to get really tired and that little balloon is going to be exhausting. And so it's so much easier to take that balloon, and these are the feelings, and just pop it out in the open. And so we're going to talk more about that, about being able to identify what these feelings are that we're pushing down. Like, this is work. This is work that we're talking about. It doesn't come naturally. That's why we have to do these kinds of talks. But it's about putting a name to the feeling and being able to say it out loud and be heard by another living person. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kim has prepared, and it's a file for you to download if you want to have that right now. But she's prepared something called a feelings wheel. We're going to get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
But for those of you who want to have that, to refer to that, Kim's going to teach us what to do that in a moment.
Yeah.
And Diane, thank you for these 2 resources that you have popped up there. I do not know them, but I love your resources, and I'm looking forward to to definitely diving into those. Kim, take us a little bit further in our presentation.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of questions will be answered as we go forward. Yeah.
Let me just get there. Okay, here we go.
Great.
All right, take us through.
All right. Well, I wanted to share just some typical responses to grief. I would say normal, but like we said earlier, normal is a setting on the dryer, I think. I don't know. But some typical responses to grief: reduced concentration, a sense of numbness, change in sleep patterns, changed eating habits, a desire to review the relationship that's ended, wishing some things had been different, and a roller coaster of emotional energy.
All right, Kim. Okay, so Kim's put some responses out there. It's poll time. We want to hear from you. What would you like? Which responses can you relate to the most? And we'd love to hear from you. Reduced concentration, a sense of numbness, change in sleep patterns, changed eating habits, desire to review the relationship, wishing some things had been different, roller coaster of emotional energy, or all of the above. So we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and take that poll, and then this will help Kim know how to respond to where we're at and what you'd like more of. Thank you so much.
We got 100% right now at wishing some things had been different. Oh, and then the sense of numbness jumps up at 50%, and now we're at the sense of numbness is at 28%. Sleep patterns are at 14%. Change of eating habits are at 12%. Oh, it just changed again. Wishing some things had been different are at 25%. Reduced connection.
Oh, there's a number of them that are quite high.
18%, all of the above.
So we've got 18% tie for numbness, sleep patterns, wishing things had been different, and all of the above.
Wow. All right. Everybody is normal.
And actually, it's changed just a little bit. Oh, it keeps changing. And we better give it another second or two.
Okay.
It's hard to see which ones are actually in the lead. And wow, everything is quite equal, Kim.
Reduced connection and wishing things are different. We're both at 16%. Oh, and now sleep patterns is also 16%. Wow.
This and concentration. Yeah, such variety, and it's changing by the second. Mm-hmm. Thank you for those of you who are just giving. Okay, so the winning equal ones at the moment are wishing things had been different, desire to renew the relationship, sleep patterns, and reduced concentration. Those are all big scores.
Okay. Well, let's start. I'll work my way from the bottom up. How about that? Wishing some things had been different. So this occurs when something, a relationship ends abruptly, or a change happens and it was out of the blue, or maybe you knew it was coming, but you never got the chance to say something, do something, communicate something, or you wish that the other person had responded in a different way, or had communicated something different than what they did. It may be that there were actions taken that you wish you could take back. So this is wishing some things had been different. It could be just simply wishing that something hadn't happened, or wishing that something had. And then as we go to desire to review the relationship, it is absolutely normal when a relationship changes to think back to the beginning when you first became aware of that person and review all the ups and downs of that relationship. That is perfectly normal. And we see God doing it all through the Old Testament, and even Jesus in the New Testament, reviewing the relationship with Israel over and over again, the ups and the downs. So we're in good company. We're made in the image of God. So he's reviewing the relationship. We're going to naturally review the relationship. It's part of our design. And it's a gift to help us in the grief process. And then, reduced concentration. Was that the other one?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got all
And
of
also numbness. Numbness
Okay.
was quite high and concentration.
Okay. Well, think about all we've talked about, all the changes. There's the change event, then there were all the other changes swirling around outside. There's intangible losses, and we're reviewing the relationship. Is there any question about why we might have a loss of concentration? And plus, I think it's God's gift to us to kind of slow us down during this time, to give us a time to heal. And I think that sense of numbness comes in a little bit there. Our senses may be overwhelmed, and we may have a hard time staying in the present moment because of that. And so a practical tip I have for if you have a sense of numbness and you want to bring yourself back to the present moment, you find yourself just drifting, you can just think about your five senses right now. What do I see? What am I hearing? What do I smell? What can I touch? What can I taste? Like where am I truly present? Like even putting your feet firmly on the floor to realize, okay, I'm grounded, I'm right here. Are just some tips if you're having this kind of sense of numbness. But again, it is a little bit of an anesthetic, I think, from God when the pain is really fresh and raw.
Yeah. Kim, we've got a question from Dale, quite a good one. And this question is about faith and grief. So we need support, and sometimes with our faith, we're just supposed to believe through it and just, trust God in the midst of it. And yet the grief is so real.
It
so
is.
Can you speak about grief and faith and how we put those two together?
Okay. So there is a difference between faith and feelings. Faith, our faith, I can give you an example of a flat tire. So if we look at the flat tire, that's our loss and that's our grief. And we come to the flat tire and we can pray for air to go back into the flat tire. Or we can pray that the help comes quickly. And yes, miracles happen. And yes, air can go back into the flat tire. But in the case of grief, let's let our faith empower the healing and recovery process. We cling to Scripture, cling to the Word, cling to the Lord, but let's still take the steps of recovery so we can complete the unfinished business. Because what we don't see God doing in the Old Testament is slapping a scripture on top of his grief and pain and suffering. No, he expresses it out of his heart very directly and very, very expressively. And again, we're made in his image to express these things out. And the Lord, when he's doing it, he knows in the Old Testament that he's looking toward completion, because we see Jesus on the cross saying, "It is finished." So all of God's disappointment in his relationship with humanity is completed on the cross. Jesus says, "It is finished." Everything has been made available to us now to have that relationship with God that he's always longed for and that we were created for. So as he models that, if you can be God and express your feelings and your grief, then those of us made in his image certainly are to be doing that as well.
I love that completion picture that you have. You give us, even Jesus needed to be completed in this process as well. And it's a process towards healing of the unfinished business. And I think that's the way you talk a lot about the grief and the unfinished business. Yeah. Thank you for just putting that quite clear for us.
Yeah. So in addition to, what we have are emotional pain, but what happens is we get intellectual solutions, and they're unhelpful. So these 6 myths of unhelpful intellectual information go as follows. don't feel bad. At least this didn't happen. Or, oh, just replace the loss. There's more fish in the sea. You'll find another boyfriend. Or be strong. Don't let anybody see you frown or cry. Be strong. Or, hey, time heals all wounds. Just give it time. And you know what? While you're giving it time, why don't you just stay busy? Stay busy. That will fill all your time. You won't even think about it. And then over time, we learn, I'm going to just have to grieve alone. And Dan, it does start from that moment when they say, if you're going to cry, go to your room. Or it does. It starts early. And you can see in that, these myths are caught early, beginning around age 3. And then they're really solidified around the time a person is 13 to 15. If they haven't been given the proper tools to directly address and express the unfinished business to another person. We've got a poll.
Time for a poll. So here's our poll that we want to put up. It's the first 3 of these myths. Would you like to talk more about don't feel bad, at least, replace the loss, or be strong? We'd love to have you vote.
Ooh, they're coming in 50% and 50% at the moment.
So give it a second. Yeah,
The top one and the bottom one are neck
it
and
looks
neck.
like Kim start with be strong and then go to don't feel bad, at least.
Okay. All right, we're going to start then with be strong. So be strong can sound like this. Don't fall apart. Get a hold of yourself. Or we may say, I'm fine. And we define fine as feelings I'm not expressing. So when we're saying...
Can you repeat that, Kim? This is so good. Fine. It's an acronym. F-I-N-E. And
Yes.
what is, when we say I'm fine, what are we saying?
Feelings I'm not expressing. So we're holding it all in. We're being strong when we say I'm fine. Yeah. All right. So the effect of this is we may begin to feel really drained because it takes a lot of energy, just like with that balloon, to keep holding things in and to look strong. And you see that award ribbon there with an X on it. I want to tell you, you're never going to get an Academy Award, an acting award, a Log Oscar for acting strong. The award will never come, but you will be rewarded with being very drained and a loss of aliveness. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
So the second one was don't feel bad, at least.
Okay, so for don't feel bad, at least, people may say, oh, their suffering is over. Don't feel bad. They may say she's in a better place. Or others have it worse. Don't feel bad. That's where that at least comes in. At least this other awful thing didn't happen. So that's where that comparison comes in, and it's not helpful. So the effect of don't feel bad is it doesn't feel safe to trust others, and we may start to wonder if there's something wrong with us. Yeah. Yep. Whole time.
So let's go to that second set of those 6 major myths. Would you like to talk more about how time heals, stay busy, or grieve alone? Which one would you like Kim to address a little bit more? The poll is coming in and it's
please remember,
changing
these
by
are
the
the
moment.
myths. These are not, she's going to explain how just to stay busy. These are the myths.
So Kim, we've got 45%. Oh, it's changing, about 50% with time heals.
Okay.
And the second highest is grieve alone. So will you start with time heals and then go to grieve alone?
Yes. So time heals. I'm going to share something on the whiteboard for time heals. You've all probably heard about the 5 stages of grief. And that is based on some writing about people who are actually dying. Those 5 stages were kind of a linear process for people who are actually dying. And like through time, you would progress through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And now they've added a new stage, meaning, finding meaning from it all. And I'm just here to say today, it's really not a linear process. And actually, the folks who are talking about this now are acknowledging it's not a linear process. It's just kind of more like this. We experience emotions, a roller coaster of emotions, and as we take the path toward recovery and completion, that's what's going to help us get to the meaning in completion. So I just wanted to share that with you.
So good.
So, Kim, are you saying that grief might be something that's a little bit messy?
You got it. Yes, I am. So again, in this Time Heals, I will just read to you. You might hear "just give it time." Time heals all wounds. But what have we learned already today that happens over time if we don't complete unfinished business? It starts piling up. Just starts piling up. One loss after another. It gets heavier and heavier until it feels like we have boulders in our backpack instead of just rocks.
So good.
Great.
And then we're going to talk about grieve alone. So again, you may have a loss of trust because people aren't comfortable with feelings. That's why we're having this discussion. People don't know what to do with our grief. So it's just easier sometimes to go and close the door and cry or to pretend that we're fine. So feelings I'm not expressing. But what happens when we grieve alone? Well, it starts with get to your room if you're going to cry, or give mom her space if mom doesn't want to be seen crying. I need a few minutes to be alone, or just give them space. He needs a few minutes to be alone. That's what it can sound like, grieve alone. The effect is we may think we need to isolate so we're not a burden to others. So that's the effect of this one.
Wow.
We get these messages from a young age, and then we think, okay, well then if I have to show emotion, it's going to burden someone else.
Yeah, and that's not the case, is it? Dale has a comment here, vulnerability and empathy. I hate it when people say that God would not have given this challenge to you if you could not have handled it. Anything like that makes me scream. Yeah, so like, be strong, God wouldn't have given it to you if you weren't that strong. So
that's right.
Just reinforce that myth about be strong, and we truly need people.
That's right.
Yeah, or little boys don't cry, big girls don't cry, being emotional is a weekend. Those are all lies.
Yes.
Another comment there. That's really good to remember that.
And I'd say for the comments, if you guys have heard any of these, if you've been grieving and you've heard some of these comments, if you want to share them, I'd be happy to hear that too. Because sometimes it's just healthy and feels good to share, oh my gosh, someone said this to me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let's carry on. Go ahead and put that right in the comment, like Kim said, and we'll be glad to get back to that.
So here's our slide on faith is different than feelings, and really the point being that yes, we can be encouraged by our faith and our relationship with the Lord, and He is our strength. But unless we find a way to communicate out of our heart the unfinished business, then the grief will build up and accumulate, and we'll have that loss of aliveness. And we're called to be alive, fully alive.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Tell us about disturbs. I love this one.
Disturbs. So listen, we've talked about how there's a roller coaster of emotional energy, right? And in the word emotion is the word motion. And so that's energy. And so when we have a loss and we have these mixed emotions, there's going to be energy that goes with that. What do we do with the energy? Well, here are some unhelpful things that we're taught to do often. And so we might go to food, fantasy as an escape. use alcohol, drugs to numb the emotions, the energy. We might sleep, go shopping. They call it retail therapy. Even religious activity. I definitely became a church lady when I was having some personal grief back years ago and got very involved in the church, but I still carried the pain of those other losses with me until the time where I learned about grief recovery. We could go to anger as our only way of releasing emotional energy. We would work all the time. Some people use sex, humor, or even perfectionism and control. Okay, so now I've got all this energy and I'm just going to use it to try to control everything and everyone around me. So this gives us real insight into people that we see and behavior we may not understand, that there's probably some grief under the surface when you're seeing these kinds of things.
So I'm just wondering, how are you in the chat feeling about this topic of grief? I feel like it's so big, and it would be really helpful to take this on further. And I'm just wondering, this Sturbs, I know Kim said she would be available next week. What do you think? Would you like to continue Duzie Live next week, next Tuesday, on more of grief, taking it further, especially in this area of Sturbs? Short-term energy relieving behaviors. Wow. If you would like to see that happen, write the word yes and an S for Sturbs, because we might not know how to yes, yes, S. If you would be interested in that being for next week, let us know in the chat by writing yes, S.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so the reason that these work, as y'all are giving your responses, I'll just say the reason that some of these feel like they're working is because it gives us a temporary relief, the illusion of feeling better. Really, we just feel different, but anything different than pain seems to feel better. And so we can get into some unhealthy patterns of depending on these kind of morally neutral things for the most part, but they just become an unhealthy dependence or pattern of behavior that can lead to more losses. For me, my go-to would be sugar, and now I have high cholesterol. So it's kind of like that's a secondary loss of health for me for the times that I've turned to sugar in my grief. So even though I know the right tools, I don't always use them.
What do you think? If you are willing, would you be willing to put some of your Sturbs that you've identified, put some of those Sturbs that you've identified right there in the chat as well? Matt says, seeing these Sturbs is a bit of an aha moment. So he really appreciates that. And Kim, just so you know, there's an overwhelming response of yes. Michaela says yes. Illy says yes, S. Jacob, Cheryl, Lorena, Roseanne, Liz, Evelyn, Lara, Dorothea, Matt, and us. We all say yes to S. So let's make that plan. Let's think about that further.
We could get T-shirts made. Yes to S.
There you go.
I think for me, some of my Sturbs, the energy relieving behaviors. I love chocolate, of course. I try to limit that because that really. It doesn't do great for me. Yes, it does great short term, but not in the long term. But yeah, these short term Sturbs. And yes, please, we'd love to hear more about that. So maybe we won't carry on right now with that. Let's go to the next bit because we're going to go there next week, shall we?
All right.
And we're really at the 60-minute mark. So we're just going to go a little bit further because we want Kim to continue to unpack this whole grief that she's prepared for us. And then we want to invite you to stay on for the backstage where we talk about the emotional energy checklist, practical ways to look at grief and ourselves.
Yeah, and we're almost there. So how is grief good? Because it's a process, it's a time and a season given toward hope and recovery. And the recovery is a freedom to live here in the present moment with love and without fear. And while we can't undo what happened, we can do something about our response to what happened. And response is the root word of responsibility. So our responsibility is to make small and correct choices. We don't have to do anything huge, just one small and correct choice at a time. And you've made one today. So thank you for having the courage to join the discussion about good grief.
Yes.
So now we're going to talk about good grief relief. And we'll talk more about this in the backstage portion. But I wanted everybody to have a look at this. So when we're talking with people, or hopefully we can find a safe person who would be willing to listen and hear us as we do these things, what we want to do is validate and acknowledge the grief and trauma. We don't want to use those myth statements. We just want to validate with something like, I can't imagine. I am here with you in this time. I'm here to listen. I'm here. We want to identify and name the loss, tangible and intangible. We want to say, wow, it sounds like that was a loss of safety for you. How did that feel? We want to help them name and express these things out loud. Help name the feelings, because when people tell a story, they want us to hear how they feel. And understand that often when we express guilt, it really means we wish something had been different or better or more. If we didn't intend harm, it usually means I wish that had been different or better or more. And then we just want to give people a voice, to be a big heart with ears as they give voice to their undelivered communications, the things that they have needed to say or things they felt were never heard. We want to help them identify the stimuli that leads to disturbs, if that's something they can start to become aware of, and then help them make choices. Just having the discussion about it is a good step in the right direction. Yeah.
And I love that. Imagine trying to paint a room with a saw, a hammer, or a screwdriver. No, we need a paintbrush. We also need the correct tools to address our grief. And there is your paint. There's your paint equipment right there. Love
That's
that.
right. That's right. And here is a tool. Here is a paintbrush. This is a feelings wheel. And it's just something you can download to have it in the front of your journal. That's where I keep mine. If you can't even name the feelings, this is just something that you can go to and say, oh, I'm bored. Oh, wow, that's related to sadness. Oh, I'm sad. Oh, wow. Yeah, and so this is just a tool for you to download.
And where do you keep that tool, Kim?
And I keep it in my journal, is where I keep it. Whatever works for folks, like keep it in your Bible, keep it in your journal, keep it on your desktop, whatever works for you, on your phone. I've actually had this download on my phone as well in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it is there in the files to download in case you haven't seen it. So you can download that now, and you will also be able to download that in the replay. We have a couple questions here. Some people have to go about now. And yes, this with the same link that you have to join us on Duzie Live, as always, you can watch the replay at your own time, or you can come back and watch it and repeat any of the portions. We also put it up on our Duzie Potter YouTube
But not
channel.
until next week.
Next week we'll do that, but it will be up there if you want to skip forward and see the parts you want. When you watch the replay, it's from start to end, and there's not a possibility to go to a particular portion, but up on YouTube it is. And yes, you may take a screenshot. Take a screenshot of anything you'd like to take a screenshot of. We'll hold that there just for 1 second for you. Take that screenshot. And
So
Kim, there's your info.
There's my info. You can email me if you have follow-up questions. You can WhatsApp me. There's my phone number. You can come visit Ken and me if you would like. We have a room set aside for dear friends from all over the world. And then that's the address. The Facebook address is for my grief recovery page. So that kind of reviews some of the same information, and it's a place you can ask questions, comment, things like that.
Yes. And you also have this grief recovery method website. That's a great
Yes.
resource for us as well.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
okay. This is the Grief Recovery Institute where I was trained. I was trained by one of the authors of the Grief Recovery Handbook, and they have trained specialists all over the world. So in the blue box, you can actually enter your location and find a grief recovery specialist in your area. If you would like to do that, that would be someone who could walk you through the specific steps toward completion. And then I've got arrows. There's a blog associated with this website that has got all kinds of topics around grief, as well as I believe there have been some blogs about the pandemic as well. There are books that can be ordered. The Grief Recovery Handbook is a great one. And then I've also got, if you have children, When Children Grieve. This walks parents through being more authentic and transparent in their grief, and then how to talk to their children about grief, and an even emotional energy checklist for children. It's a great resource. And then there's a free download with information, some information that we've talked about today as well. So I just wanted you guys to have that resource for your own time and use.
Thank you so much, Kim. This has been amazing.
Yay! So valuable. I'm glad we get you next week too for Sturbs.
So we are going to, in a few moments, take a break and then move into backstage, which is basically the same, but it's much more of just throwing out the questions and dialoguing back and forth. But if you need a short break to run to the restroom or get a drink or something, do that, and then we will jump back.
We'll stay here a little longer. And yes, if you have further questions, you want to hear more about something Kim said or something that you're thinking of, this backstage portion is going to be available for you as well. Kim has this little bonus resource, which is amazing, called the Emotional Energy Checklist that she's going to run us through. And then we're going to take all of your questions that you've already put in the chat and any that you want to just pop in there right now as well.
And Kim, just let you know, Matt Taylor, when things open up again, he's coming to visit you.
Yes.
That's
wonderful.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is now the backstage portion, is it? Drum roll. Yeah, so this is the backstage portion. So those of you who need to go, we completely understand, but you don't want to miss this. So stick around for a few minutes if you can. Kim, take us through the backstage emotional energy checklist.
Okay. Well, this emotional energy checklist is a way to discover some things, some unfinished business you may have in your heart. So this is an example of some of the work we would do with a grief recovery specialist or what the grief recovery handbook would walk you through. But this is more like the emergency room for the pandemic. Just some tips and guides for you that you can use here in real time.
So Kim, I just want to hop in here and say that this is a file that's available right now for download. So what you're seeing on the screen, Kim is making that available to you to help you process through that. So I would encourage you to download that now or whenever you get a chance. Thank you.
Yeah. So I chose a PowerPoint slide with a pencil because I really hope that this is something you might consider journaling about or writing or somehow creatively documenting for yourself and not just to use as you have conversations with others. I really hope you take these tools for yourself to help yourself. All right, so we're going to talk about changes, challenges, and choices, beginning with changes. So the first question, what's happening for you? How is this situation changing your life? This just kind of helps begin the discovery process as you just kind of download what's in your heart and your mind on paper or into whatever medium you're comfortable with, but just a way to start discovering everything that's in here and getting it out. So sometimes just listing these things can take away the power of the event. And if you're in a conversation with someone and listening, just do that without diminishing, negating, or comparing. Just be that heart with ears. And I hope that if there's someone available to listen to you, if they don't know how to be a heart with ears, that you can teach them. You can teach them that I need you to be able to hear me. I don't need to be fixed, but it's just really important that another human being hear what I have on my heart and mind today. This validates that what you're experiencing, what they're experiencing, is real. It's real. It's not your imagination. There really is a lot going on, and this is a way to start to download that and organize it. Okay? Any questions there?
It's a plug.
Plug for journaling. So then we move on to the challenges question, which is, what challenges do these changes present for you? So now we're going a little deeper hopefully to the feelings level. We've listed out all the changes, like the events, people, places, things, and now we're going to, and maybe some other intangible losses. Now we're going to get down to the challenges, the feelings that these are bringing up for you. Use that feelings wheel. And if you're in a conversation with someone, just listen with honor and respect, without judgment. If they're struggling to find feeling words, maybe you can help them. Maybe you can say, hey, I have got this feelings wheel. This might help you identify what the challenges are. Expect conflicting feelings. Someone might feel all at once thankful, concerned, guilty, terrified. And what do we call those conflicting feelings? Grief. That's right. So, and also reframe the G word, and that's guilt. For example, if someone is feeling guilty that they're still able to work, but yet their friend or family member has lost their job or is struggling, just remind them, help them understand if there's no intent of harm in your action, it's probably that you wish it was different or better for them. So we just really try to explain that guilt, when there's no intent to harm, that it's usually that we wish something was different or better or more. Because sometimes when we use the word, I feel guilty, the word itself just heaps on more hurt. So when we can find what we really mean, do you mean you wish there was something different or better or more? Can we just put that G word back in the dictionary? It can help. Okay. All right. So that's our challenge. And now we move to choices. This is the empowering part. While we can't change the big picture, we do have ability to change or decide how we respond. We really do. We really do have that ability. So brainstorm, either by yourself or together with someone else. What choices do I have within these changes and challenges? Hey, I could express my feelings through some creative way. Get creative together. Draw it, paint it, sing it, lament it, life map it, share it with someone safe. But I just ask you to please decide to do something that will move what's in your heart and mind out, and be able to hopefully share it with someone safe, or be that safe person for someone else. And making even a small choice can help us feel better. And you chose to come backstage. So I hope that was a good choice for you today. So a little more on being a heart with ears, because it sounds like there are a lot of people on the chat that help others. So congratulations. You've given voice to your story and how you're feeling. Hopefully you feel heard. This is what we are hoping for from the person talking to us. They've given voice to their story and they have felt heard, and we've heard how they feel. You can ask a friend to listen like a heart with ears without trying to fix anything. Or you've helped someone else give voice to their story and how they're feeling, and hopefully they feel heard. And I know you guys now are getting the picture. Listen like a heart with ears without trying to fix anything.
So good.
You're on the path to identifying and taking some steps toward recovery, because you're discovering what's unfinished. And that's the first step.
Thank you, Kim, so much. I love that emotional energy checklist. I'm seeing in the chat space that some people are not able to download that. So if that's you and you are not able to download it, you can email us, connect@duzie.com, and ask for the feelings wheel, or you can ask for the emotional energy checklist, and we can send that straight to your email space. So sorry for those of you who don't have the ability to download it. And those of you who have to leave, it's okay. You can leave anytime. Thanks for letting us. Bye, Diane. And anybody who has some questions, we would love for you to just put that in the chat. And we are willing to hang out a lot longer and just chat about it.
Kim, do you remember Elaine on the ship? Diane is
Elaine's mom.
Diane and I think we're in the laundry together. I'm pretty sure.
Love when that laundry connection happens. So Dale makes a comment here, which is great. Maybe you can expound a little bit on it. Really, that is the only power we have, choice. Can you talk more about that, please?
The other one. I don't have any control over anything except my choice.
Yeah, so those two together,
Mm-hmm.
it's the power and it's the control that we have is our choice or our response to whatever's happening.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, the example that we use in grief recovery is the picnic. I don't know if you can see the picnic.
Oh, an artist.
Once I met my quota. No.
Put it back up there again, right in the middle, like under your chin.
Oh.
Yeah, and then straight forward from your chin. You got it right there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we've planned a picnic. It's a beautiful day. We've spread our blanket. We put out the picnic basket and it starts to rain. And oh my goodness, the picnic is ruined. But what really ruins the picnic? Is it the rain? Is it my response to the rain? Or is it something else?
What do you think? You can put your answers right in the chat. Is it the rain, my response to the rain, or something else? We don't have a poll formulated about that, but that would have been a great one.
There was a pop-up question.
That's great. So Dan's got a response. He's putting it up there.
Okay.
I like Dan's comments. Can you see it? What ruined the picnic? The fire ants. That wasn't an option. Okay.
Okay.
What says my response to the rain? Dorothea says response. Laura says response. Vishu says response. Michaela response. Roseanne response. Jacob response. And Vishu says the storm. In India, they get the most amazing storms.
Whoa.
We have been in those. Yeah. So I can see why you're saying storm.
All right. So I have to confess it was a trick question because the answer is neither. It's not the rain's fault and it's not my response's fault. It is our belief system's fault.
Wow.
It's what we believe about what makes us feel things. That's what's at fault. So it's really what we learned in these early years. Like, have we learned that things make us mad? Have we learned that that it's always someone else's fault that makes me feel a certain way? And that's actually very common from the way we're influenced as kids, because parents even say, you make me so frustrated, but really the parent is not managing. They might feel frustrated, but they feel frustrated in response to the child's behavior. So it's our belief system that ruins the picnic, because if we think the picnic or the rain did it, it's because we're believing something makes us feel a certain way. So what I'm here to tell you is you actually have a choice to try something new and to say, instead of, oh, the rain, to say, I feel really angry and frustrated right now. I could cry and I wish the sun would come out, and I prayed and it didn't come out. And now I'm upset with God. but to just express it out. To just express it out. Like we don't even have to blame. We don't even have to blame the brain or anything else. We just take a risk and express what's on the inside out. And try that and see if it's helpful.
I don't like fire ants. How about that?
And I'm fine with stomping on things.
Yeah. I think you gave us a really powerful nugget right there. It's inside out. I think that's something that I'm also dealing with a lot of girls right now as well. Beauty is also inside out. We're talking grieving. I think that inside out,
Yeah.
we try to fix things externally when they're non-fixable. And we can't really change those external things, but we can change our response, our thinking patterns, our way we process. And many times, as you've been saying as well, we need other human beings to process and to allow us to communicate that to them and to allow them to help us process our inside out so that our responses can be from a really deep founded space that is our reality, that's got a safe space to be.
Yeah.
Any other specific questions for Kim or for one another dealing with this whole area of good grief and our response, our choices? We'd love to go deeper into that.
Dale has a comment, so true. No one can control our emotional responses. That's the internal. People are often too fearful to admit that because they would rather place blame rather than accept what we can control. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
I think that sums it up very well, actually. It's been modeled for us from the time that we're young to place blame and to make, say you made me, rather than to accept that there is pain in this life. And what we can control really is to accept it and face it and move through it, or to push it down like the balloon and then just start letting it pile up. Yeah. Sometimes that's a little bit of a disillusionment for people, to accept there is pain in this life.
Kim, what would you say to a young parent raising kids? How would you say that a parent should raise their kids within the whole good grief? Embracing those things, making the choices, take the responsibility, all those things you've said. Is there a different pattern that could be laid out? I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. That is what is so wonderful about this book, When Children Grieve, because it teaches parents that exact thing. Teaches them to get complete with their own pain from loss, and then to just move forward being authentic with children. In other words, like if there's a death, I remember when my grandfather died, and I never saw my father cry, and so he went into a room and closed the door to cry. And then I was told, go to your room to cry. But I wonder how it would have been if my father had been able to sit in the same room with all of us and cry. Well, actually, now I do know. When my mother died, my father was at a point in his life, and I had done some intervention with some of these tools, and he was able to sit in the room and cry with his family when my mother died without trying to hide his grief. So, and that was just beautiful that we could share that together. And children, it's okay for children to see tears, because we don't want to teach them to grieve alone. Right. We want to teach them that, oh, this is going to be normal. It's not, and it does help get out the emotional energy. One of the things that makes us store emotional energy is swallowing tears. People actually learn to swallow their tears, and it has physical ramifications as well as emotional.
Kim, I have never heard about swallowing tears before. Can you talk more about that?
Well, when I heard about it was that when you go through the steps of grief recovery, we do some of these emotional checklist activities. Like we lay out our whole grief history, and then we pick the relationship or event that's impacting us the most now. And then we do a review of that relationship. And then I'm giving you guys nuggets here that just because you stayed so long. And from the review of that relationship, you go into components of forgiveness, I'm sorry's, and I wish things had been different. Thank you, sorry's, forgives, and how I wish things had been different. And this is a communication you make to the person, not in the person's presence, but in the presence of a safe, trained person or someone that you feel safe with. And so when it comes time to make that communication, and the last line of this communication is saying goodbye to our relationship to the pain. And that is a very powerful statement after you've done all of this emotional work, and now you're going to say goodbye. And people, because of their influence, they'll want to cry, but they'll start swallowing the tears during this very emotionally impactful and healing time. And so we just say, you're going to be tempted to swallow the tears. Let them come. Just let them come.
Well, thank you. I think we've come to a very good place at our backstage that we could probably end it, because we know next week
Pause it
we're going to
for
come
part
back
2
with you. And I would just encourage anyone who's still with us to get some of your questions together. And next week we'll go even deeper into this. And I think because we're at this situation right now with the virus, you know, I think it's these things are good, not just for how do I go back and find the healing, but how do I also help others? And I know that none of us are going to, unless we go through the training and get the skills that Kim have, we're not going to, and we shouldn't go as deep as Kim would go. But I think there's always something we can do to
big heart
to help
and
people
listening
by
ears.
listening.
Yeah.
Well, and we are the priesthood of believers, so we can affirm to each other, you know, you are forgiven, you are a child of God, you are part of this community. We are the priesthood of believers, so that is something, just being present with that person and affirming them and validating them is huge. It's huge.
Make sure they belong.
Yeah. And Dale says something that you gave in your story of your father, for example. Often the way we naturally respond is or becomes a learned behavior.
That's right.
And a behavioral response. It's not natural.
That's
so
right.
we can retrain ourselves. That's what
That's
I'm
right.
hearing you say.
Yes.
If we identify these and these patterns, and letting go of pain can be a very guilt-filled place, Dale said. If it's not done well, or if it's rushed, it does need time, doesn't it?
It needs time. This is for each relationship. It's an 8-week process that we go through. Yeah, and it doesn't mean the person will never be sad again. Completion simply means that you can live in the present moment now, that you've delivered what needed to communicated, what needed to be communicated, that was unfinished, and you don't have to keep reviewing that over and over again. It's been expressed and it's been heard. And now when I have memories of that event or that person, I can remember the happy and the sad, and it won't take me down. Yeah.
So our response to grief is not in our DNA. It can be we can learn a better way to move through it.
A better way than our DNA. That's
Better
a
way
bit of
than
a
our
rhyme.
DNA, and make the right choices.
Yeah.
Take responsibility. Thank you so much for this day that you've given to us. And I have so much to process.
Yes, and thank you for all of you who have joined us Duzie Live, and those of you who are watching the replay. And if this has been of value to you, we encourage you to invite a handful of friends to come back in the future. And next week, Kim, we're doing Sturbs with you. Is there any assignment you can give us to help prepare for next week?
I would encourage you to be starting to pay attention to when you have mixed emotions about anything. Do you start to reach for something to feel different or better? Is there something you're reaching for or doing automatically so you avoid those emotions? just start becoming aware. This is not about heaping on guilt or feeling bad. This is about becoming aware, just becoming aware. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, hope all of you are blessed with this talk, and may you live this life this week fully alive, and may get in touch with the grief that you have and turn it into good grief for your sake and for those who are around you, and also for the glory of God. So can't wait to see you next week here on Duzie Live.
With Sturbs. We'll come up with a name for it, but we're so blessed by you, Kim. Thank you for sharing your life experience and your wisdom. And again, thank you everyone who's joined us today for Duzie Live. Good grief.
Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.